Today we are going to talk about this productivity technique called Zettelkasten. Okay, this is a German word for inbox. Okay, or notebook or whatever, however you want to translate it. There will be two parts to this. The first part is mostly going to be uh, theory, and then I'll show an example of how I have been using Zettelkasten. And then there will be a follow up session where I will show how to configure the various tools to make Zettelkasten more accessible for all of us. Okay, cool. So, as always, right, with any productivity technique or any mental model, you get what you put in. So, nothing is going to generate, um, nothing is a magic bullet, nothing is going to generate something of thin air for you. All these are ways for us to structure our thinking and ways for us to structure the information that we are processing. Fair enough. Okay. Now, in this presentation, I will have two parts. The majority of the presentation will be going to this actual deck itself, and then I'll probably spend about 10 minutes taking you through my actual Zettelkasten notes, and then we can have a Q&A at the end of it. I'm also a beginner. Probably I might have 2 3 months more than most of the people over here. I can try to answer questions as much as I can. Okay. So let's get into why. Okay, let me talk about the fundamental need that all of us have, right? So, um, in this day and age, we are bombarded with information from a variety of sources. Okay, and this bombarding of information is affecting us on multiple levels. One is it leads to information overload. Okay, so I probably cannot remember what I heard yesterday because something else has happened today. The second problem is, let's say you're reading a really good book. Let's say Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? I read it like maybe 3 4 years back. I remember the core concept, but the book had so many ideas in it which I don't really recollect. Okay, so the point I'm trying to drive here is how do we capture this information so that we can actually use it going forward? Okay, the third problem that we have is, let's say I find a way of capturing all this information. Okay. This information is all in islands. Okay. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. Okay. I got some concepts about finance. I put it in the finance island. I worked in networks. I worked on retail domain. I got some ideas. I'm putting it in the retail island. Okay. Or maybe I watched an interesting YouTube video about some music. Okay. And there I got some ideas. Now, all of these are disparate sources of information which live in their own containers. What we really want is a way to put all of this together so that we get some kind of coherence to what we are processing and thereby get some insights that we can give back to the world, right? Obviously, there are many advantages to getting insights, putting things together, because the more you learn about the world, the more you find that the patterns keep repeating across multiple domains. I don't mean domains just in the way that we use it in the software industry. I just mean this is different walks of life, right? So there are solutions available to many of these problems. It's just that we are not able to take one from one spot and keep it somewhere else. Okay. So net, how do we move from a note taker to somebody who actually generates insights? Okay. What can I do? Well, rather, what will help me in organizing my thoughts? Okay. Um, Organizing the information that I'm receiving, thereby where I can share the ideas across domains, identify patterns, see how one idea relates to another, and generate some insights that are useful for me and the rest of the people around me. Fair enough. Now, there are multiple ways of doing this. We are just going to talk about one way, which is Zettelkasten. Okay. Now, Zettelkasten, the concepts are going to be quite similar to, let's say, a second brain, or I'm sure this idea has come up multiple times over the world, I mean, over the centuries. For example, when I was doing my research, I found out that Zettelkasten is basically nothing but a way of indexing ideas on paper cards. That's how they used to do it earlier, right? And that immediately brought me to the mind of, I don't know if you guys have seen old school public libraries, right? Where you have the Dewey Decimal System. So the books have index cards which give us metadata about the information. If you're looking for a book, you go look by the last name of the author, okay, or you look by the category the book belongs to, find the card that relates to the book, and that will tell you in which shelf we can go and find it. Okay. So this way of organizing information has been there before. It's that Zettelkasten is probably a very specific way of doing it. How do I start with Zettelkasten, right? So let's say we are reading a book, fair enough. And this, and when you're reading the book, right, we are getting tons of insights, we are making notes, we are doing a lot of things. Okay. Now, all of this goes into something that in the Zettelkasten world we call a literature note. Now, depending on which video you watch or which article you read, this name varies. But the concept is you basically access an information source, okay, and you capture the ideas and the notes from the source in some form. Okay, this can be when you're reading, let's say, a book on Kindle. Maybe it was a fiction book. Okay, maybe you're reading George R. R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire, right? And then there's an awesome Tyrian dialogue that comes up. You bookmark it. Okay, you can use it in Kindle, right? That is also a way of capturing the thoughts from the book that you want to take forward. Or maybe you use OneNote, or maybe you use Evernote, or maybe you're like old school cool and you use a notepad to actually take down notes. Right? So essentially, this literature note captures the raw data that you think is useful for you. Okay. Now, this is one step more than most people do. Right? What is a typical problem? 99% of us read, watch, listen, and then we forget. We don't make notes. So the first step is to make notes. The second step is people might make notes. Like I have done tons of notes, but do I ever go back and look at them again? Is very unlikely, right? Now the second problem is how do I actually make um, accessing my source of notes or this bundle of notes that I have more useful. So for that, what we do is Zettelkasten has this concept called a permanent note. Okay. I mean, the name is not important. It's only the concept that is important. So what do we do in a permanent note? You have all the ideas, the cool things that you read in a book in a literature note. When you have time, you go to the literature note, you figure out what are all the discrete ideas that you want to take out from the book. Okay. I am saying book as an example. It can be a YouTube video, it can be a podcast, it can be anything else. Maybe it's a conversation you're having with someone also. Right? Now, these discrete ideas map to one note. Okay. So it's like a story in our utmost parlance. Okay. So one literature note might give rise to like 20 different ideas. Each of those 20 different ideas comes out in a note of its own. And the idea is, I mean, the whole intent is that note that has an idea is the one place where you keep incrementally adding or modifying information pertaining to that idea that it contains. Okay. So there are certain things that we need to keep in mind over here. When we took down literature notes, we are free to copy paste, we are free to do whatever we want because that's just raw. That's just the first level of filtering that we are doing. But when it comes to permanent notes, good practice suggests that we understand whatever is there that we want to convert into idea and write it in our own words. And we write it in complete sentences so that when we look at it later on down the line, once we lost the context, right? Even then it should make sense. And there is one more reason why we should write in complete sentences. I come to that later. Now, there are two things over here which make this permanent note unique. One is these notes should have insights, okay? Meaning the idea that you get from reading from your literature notes or the concept or whatever thought you had should not, it can be one to one with whatever is done in the book, right? But it is also an opportunity for you to think about what are all the insights that I can generate given what I read in this book and given what are all the ideas that I already know and put down in my Zettelkasten. And this is where the insights portion of it comes in. This might mean that you go and modify something else, or this might mean that you actually add something more than what is there in the book itself. I'll explain that when we go ahead. The thing to note here is every permanent node has a unique identifier. And this unique identifier is important because we'll use this in the later stage. Now, permanent nodes by themselves are not of much use if we don't have the relationships between them. If you go back to the original need, right, we wanted a way of organizing information, which we have. The second thing is to share the ideas across domains. Now, what we do here is when we write a note, we should also think about where it fits. Okay. What relationship does it have to the other notes that you have? When I say notes, I'm referring only to permanent notes over here. Okay. And when I'm thinking about relationships between nodes, what are all the commonalities that I can look at, right? Let's say I'm trying to relate something in per capita information, okay, with something on race. Now, they by themselves they might have lots of concepts, but there might be one place that ties them together, which is, for example, um, your race pretty much determines your per capita information income, right? I'm not saying I'm saying this is something that happens in the world, and then we can look at why this is happening and see if there are anything else that we can take out of it. Okay, or there might be something like um, the politics of power, right? So racial politics is usually driven by people who want to maintain their positions of power. If you look at capitalism, it's the same principle. So, strictly speaking, when you understand both these ideologies, you understand that capitalism and racism go hand in hand, right? And if you don't believe me, read Ibrahim X in this book. Okay, he'll explain that later. So, so we talked about literature notes, which is the raw info. We talked about permanent notes, which are the distilled ideas. And now we're talking about reference notes, which are relationships between these permanent notes. There's one more thing that I want to talk about, which is how do we do these relationships? It's very important in the sense that we should not be categorizing permanent notes. Our mind has been taught to categorize information, right? That's what we learn in school, right? Plants are creatures that do not move. They need chlorophyll to survive. And then you have animals. Animals move. They need vegetation or they need flesh to survive, so on and so forth. You have mammals. You have amphibians. You have metals. You have non-metals. We are used to thinking in terms of categories. But if you look at how we start learning, right, we don't think in terms of categories, we think in terms of relationships. And unfortunately, we lost that. So ideally, what we should do is we should not be using categories for these permanent nodes. Rather, we should be using tags because an idea can be shared across multiple domains. Now, how do you tag them? You tag them not based on what the idea is or what the domain is. You tag it based upon how you would actually be using the tag in the context, right? So, for example, I would say I have a permanent note on drawing in perspective. Okay. Now, I can say that the tag for that is hashtag perspective, but that doesn't really help me. Rather, a tag like how do I draw landscape paintings might be more useful because that is how I will be using this idea. Okay, cool. Now, the last piece of this puzzle is something that we call structure notes. These are optional and these are typically used when the number of notes that you have becomes quite voluminous. Okay, now a structure note is typically one of the biggest advantage of having a Zettelkasten, which is you try to organize information within certain tags based upon the UIDs of the permanent nodes. So what ends up happening is you sort of generate a table of contents for a group of ideas. And if you want to take it one level further, you can actually generate a book out of this. Okay. I know many of these things will seem abstract or they may seem very simple, but again, the trick comes in how you use it. Now, I just use some of the terms that Zettelkasten itself uses. Literature notes, we'll call it as an inbox. Okay, we'll call permanent notes as an archive, and we refer to how the relationships are being maintained as the reference manager. Okay, just to keep things simple. Okay, so what we've seen so far is why do we need the need for having a way to organizing information, generating insights. We've seen how Zettelkastens are built up. Now we talk about how what is the process, a simplified view on how we can use Zettelkasten to add or modify nodes. Okay, so let's just look at the process. Let's say there's some incoming data. You just watched some awesome video, or maybe you saw this presentation. You were stunned by by my charisma, right? And now you want to add some notes on Zettelkasten. What do you do? The first thing you do is, oops, sorry, yeah, you create a literature note. Okay, i.e., you take down the raw notes about what is happening in the presentation. That is, we're adding it to the inbox. Okay, and that happens in real time, right? When you might be in a lecture or you might be reading a book and you're making notes as you're reading, so on and so forth. And then once you have time, right, what you ought to do is go and check your reference manager. What I mean by that is you're looking at your tags, you're looking for um, what are all the things that they have created before. Okay. Now let's say you're looking at it. And now the question is you have to find out whether one of these ideas exists already in your database or not. So if a node does not exist, when I say a node, I mean something like an idea, permanent node does not exist. What do you do next? You add it to the archive, which is you create the permanent node, and then you add the references and the structures. Okay. What if that idea already exists? Okay. Maybe you guys already saw the article that Manikumar had pasted in the chat, and you already have an idea what Zettelkasten is, and you made notes about it. What do? You try to see if what you're learning here is offering any new insight or if it is changing what you already know. If so, what you do is you go and modify the node that captures that idea. Okay. And then what you do is you add reference and structures. On the other hand, if you find that this data offers no new insight, then you do nothing. Okay. The last thing that you need to do is you need to update all the related nodes. Okay. As a result of, let's say, a note being added or a note being modified, you there are new insights being generated, or what you thought was possible is no longer possible. You need to go and update the related notes. Okay, and that is basically the process. Okay, I know this abstract, so what I will do now is I'll just walk you through what I have done, and then hopefully it'll be more understandable.
Yeah, Karthik, and maybe the tool that you're using as well. I mean,
Sure, sure,
if
sure.
you recommend
Yeah,
me.
yeah. There are. I will actually have a separate session on the tools. Okay, but
Okay.
because the tools, actually, that's a good question. Who asked it, Swami or Rahul?
I asked
Ah,
it.
Rahul. Okay. So see, there are tools like Zettler, Zotero. There's a paid tool called Roam. You can also use OneNote. You can also use Evernote. It depends on how you want to use it and what you want to get out of it. Okay. Um, from I actually saw a lot of articles on Zettelkasten, both when I started off and when I was preparing for this session. And invariably, everybody said the same thing, which is uh, like any other productivity method, we have to modify this for our own purposes. So many of these things might be theoretical, may work in different contexts. But when it comes to your unique context, a certain tool or a certain technique might work better. So which is why I want to separate out the tools from the concept.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Cool. So let me just talk about this tool is called Zettler. Zettler. Okay. This is free and open source, and this is available only for the Mac OS. Okay. Now let me just go through this. See, I have a bunch of Zettelkastens for my drawings. Okay. So when I drew, I didn't learn drawing just by imitating people that I saw on YouTube or Udemy. I also went to classes. I watched classes, I read books, and then I also learned on my own. I watched my daughter draw. There were all the insights that came about. But I come to this later. I'll go to something that I created just for this session. So when we start off, right, I say we need to have a literature note. Let's say this is my literature note that I have. What I have done here is I have copy pasted a lot of stuff from across the intertubes, okay, in
Mhm.
a form that I thought was relevant for me. Okay. So I just wanted to see what is Zettelkast, and then I went and searched Wikipedia. I just copy pasted the history. Then I went to zettelkasten.de and I went to all the articles. I copy pasted some of those pieces. Okay. There was a huge thing on tags versus categories that I copied. There was a thing on writing. There were all the YouTube videos. Many things that I did. This is a literature note. Okay. It is your raw notes. Okay. Now, what I started doing after this is I wanted to break it down into smaller components. Okay. So what I did was, for example, I had something like this is a permanent note. Okay. Now I named it poorly, which is I called it needs for Zettelkasten. Actually, this should have been called need for information organization. Okay. Now, I have put down a lot of, for this particular card, I put down the six topics that I wanted. Okay. Then I went to, let's say, tags versus categories. In tags versus categories, I took down three important sentences based on what I thought was important for this conversation. Okay. Then what else is there? Yeah, history of Zettelkasten. And if you look at the research, there's like so much of stuff. For me, my history, I just wanted these things. Zettelkasten has been in the form of paper index, cards in boxes. Libraries use a similar form of organizing information. Who created this and who made it famous? Okay. These are all my permanent notes. Now, if you look at the tags that I'm using, right? I am obviously having a hashtag, having a Zettelkasten tag, then I'm having a history tag, then I'm having the who created it tag. Now, my hope is the next time I come to a technique or a book or an invention and I have something about how it was created, I should use hashtag who created it. Okay, then it will make sense for me. Mm, okay, cool. Anything on so far? I'll show you the drawing videos or drawing notes also. But basically, what I have tried to do is I try to take out individual ideas from it. Let's say building blocks, right? Of Zettelkasten. There are raw nodes, there are permanent nodes, relationships. Okay. Now, the moment I read some other article and I find there's yet another thing that we can add to the structure, I'll come back and add it another building blocks thing. Now, what is the advantage of doing all this? When I want to write an article, right? That's the one of the things I said I'll sell later. I can say what I did here was I put down the title of the article that I wanted to write. Then I broadly wrote down the bullet points. The first thing here was what is the need for Zettelkasten? Okay. The second thing here was um, it was called the process over here. And then I already had tags versus categories. Now, after I note these permanent notes down, right, all I had to do was link those ideas to this main note. Okay, this is like a structural note. Okay, so what happens is if I control click on this, I can actually pull out whatever information comes from that card into that particular note. One second. Yeah. Now, obviously, there are many things here which I haven't done yet. Okay. Like, for example, in the research, there was history, right? And
Mhm.
history had a permanent note over here. I chose not to put history over here. Well, let's say I'm writing a book on, or I'm having an article on comparisons of productivity methods. And over there, I want to compare the histories of how these productivity methods came about. What I would do then is I would put all the history articles in that structure note so that when I look at it, I can generate something out of this and then add English top and bottom to make it useful. This is one of the reasons why that card that you have, let's say for building blocks or tags versus categories, should be in well-rounded language so that you don't have to go back then and fix it again.
So when you say you will add all the history tags,
Hmm.
that would mean all the hashtags on history is what
It
you would look at.
no no I would actually if I were writing that's one way I can do. Okay.
Mhm.
The other way is let's say the title let's say that we'll why not we'll do one here. Okay. We just call this comparison of productivity methods. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
Now let's say um, my mind is not working now, but let's say productivity methods, uh, hashtag comparing mental models. Okay, something else, right? Now I might say the first thing I'm going to do is let's say history. Okay, what are the first one will be what are the methods I'm going to compare. Okay, fair enough. So let's say I put here Zettelkasten. Then there might be one more thing which is GTD, which is getting things done. There might be one more thing called second brain. Okay, fair enough. Then I might have something that says histories. Okay, again I might have something like history of uh, Zettelkasten. I'm not all the history. How were these methods created? Okay. Oh, no, you know what? This is also very cumbersome. Origin of these methods. Okay. So I might have something that says history of Zettelkasten. Zettelkasten. Okay. And then history of GTD. History of second brain. Okay. Then I might have something that says pros and cons. Kind of. I mean, you get the idea, no? I can keep building this over and over again. Now,
Okay.
the point I'm trying to make is, if I know I want history of Zettelkasten over here. So what I can do is, I can do something like this. Uh,
Okay.
where is that, man? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
If I do this, and I already have a history of Zettelkasten node, it makes it, I can reuse the node in multiple places. I can
Right.
reuse a note in an article that I'm writing only about Zettelkasten. I can reuse article in the note where I'm comparing productivity methods, or I can reuse it anywhere else. Got it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I got it
Okay,
now.
cool. So this is one way of doing it. I'll also show you one more.